and speak to voters. We've been doing this throughout the state. I am excited to be running for governor. I am determined that we stay the course in this state. Over the last 7 years, we have made such progress taking our state back and developing our economy. You know, for far too long, there's been this defeatist attitude in Maine, that somehow Maine is a poor state, it'll always be a poor state. And so the answer has been to grow government, and that has come at the direct expense of growing jobs. You know, I'm a mother, 2 boys, 18 and 23, and like many families in this state, I want my kids to be able to stay in Maine. And the way that we do that is by having great opportunities so that our kids don't feel like they get to go out of state in order to succeed. I've had the privilege of working alongside Governor LePage for the last 6.5 years, and I am proud of our accomplishments, getting our financial house in order, prioritizing the needs of our elderly and our disabled, and that has also allowed us to reduce the spending, to cut taxes, and to allow hardworking Mainers to keep more of their paychecks in their pockets, to allow businesses to reinvest, and that's our future. Maine can succeed, can compete with New Hampshire, with Texas, with Florida, but we've got to do that by cutting taxes and making sure that people have the ability to spend their own money, families can thrive, communities can succeed, and our state can be successful. Thank you very much.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Garrett Mason. I am the state senator for Androscoggin and Kennebec County, a majority leader of the state senate, and obviously a candidate for governor. You know, it has been an absolute pleasure to serve in the state senate for the past 8 years. And I'm running for governor because I believe that we have an incredible opportunity to build on all of the successes that we've had over the past 8 years. You know, when we first got to the state senate, our economy was lackluster at best. Our economy was suffering from high taxes, from high unemployment. We were the highest tax state in the country. We had a lot of things that really weren't going our way. But the first thing we did was we lowered taxes. That was the first thing we did. We acted on our long-held core Republican principles and knew that when you have more money in your pocket, that is better off that you spend it instead of the government. And that led to a lot of really wonderful things. We saw the average weekly wage grow. We saw more people had more money in their pocket. We saw that people had better jobs, higher paying jobs. We saw the state government coffers filled at a lower tax rate. We were able to reform welfare. We were able to get more people off of welfare and into work. We're able to give kids and families more opportunities in their education, which is something that I am very, very passionate about. All of those things are great, but we have so much more that we need to do, and that's what we're here to talk about tonight. So thank you all very much for having this debate for us tonight. We look forward to our conversation with you. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Ken Fredette. I'm the House Republican leader, and I represent Newport in the district. That's a small town about 30 miles south of Bangor. You know, I noticed as I drove in here tonight, I passed the town office where I saw what seemed to be 200 or 300 cars. And then as I asked one of the folks, you know, what are they doing down there? They said, they're down talking about the budget. Because there's a proposed 10% increase in the budget. And as I actually went into the building by mistake, and then I saw rows of people just lined up to go in and talk about the budget. And that's what they're doing right here in Cape Elizabeth. Well, that's what we do actually up in Augusta. We do the exact same thing, except we do it for the state. And what we've seen over the last 50 years is really the size of government in Maine growing in terms of government. And what that's meant is less and less money in people's pockets. You know, my daughter just graduated this past weekend from Hudson University. She got a degree in occupational therapy, and now she's going to be out looking for a job. And the great thing about that as a father is that she can actually now look for a job in the state of Maine. Because over the last 8 years, we've righted the ship. You know, 8 years ago, we didn't have any money in the rainy day fund. We now have $200 million. We've done 3 rounds of income tax cuts. We haven't gone far enough, but we need to continue to do that. But all the hard work that we've done as Republicans that we believe will really move this state forward is the reason why I'm running for governor. As I have worked for 6 years as the House Republican leader, being supportive of Governor LePage, I know there's much more that needs to be done, that can be done, because we're just getting started. So I look forward to this conversation, this opportunity to speak tonight, and I thank my fellow candidates for being here tonight.
Thank you. We will now go on to our first question. Are laws protecting our environment just right, or do we need to roll some back? And please explain. We will start with Senator Mason, and then Representative Fredette, and then Commissioner Mayhew.
Thank you. I think that they've gotten better. I think that in the past 8 years, we have made some necessary reforms to our environmental laws. One example comes to mind. Has anybody heard of a vernal pool?
I have.
Yeah. Vernal pool, the description of that was very wide. It could mean anything from a seasonal pool of water that collects after a rainstorm. It could mean a skitter track up in the North Woods. There was a lot of really broad definitions of what that meant. We were able to narrow that down to make sure that we protected the environment, but also made really good pieces of land available for development. We struck the balance between the environment and business and people's own personal use of their land. So I think that we've started to make some good changes in environmental law. That's a really good example of what we've done. But for so long, the EPA has controlled what has happened with government, with business, and with individual people. So I think that's, we've made some good strides, but I think they're probably a little too stringent still today.
So, when we talk about the environment in the state of Maine, I would say that Maine's greatest resource in the state is its people. It's hard-working, hard work ethic people. But our second greatest asset is its natural beauty and its natural environment. Up in the northern part of the state where I come from, there's a lot of wood harvesting. Down on the coastline, obviously, we have beautiful Acadia National Park. We have Catardon. You come down here, you have the beautiful coastline. I mean, it's really important that we actually do protect our natural environment. Now, the question is it's a question of balance. And so I want to give you an issue here, which I think puts it into perspective for me. A couple of decades ago, we had the conversation about widening the Maine Turnpike. And people coming into Maine, we only had 2 lanes. Traffic was backed up forever. You couldn't get traffic in here so people could come in, see our natural beauty, but more importantly, spend money in our great state. 40 million people a year now come to Maine during the summertime to enjoy it. That got stopped for about a decade because of concerns about the natural environment. And there were referendum after referendum about whether or not we should widen the turnpike because it was going to have an impact on the environment. But yes, it did have an impact on the environment, but there were also questions of safety and economy that we had to look at in balance. And so we made the right decision when we finally did widen the turnpike, but I think it sort of highlights the conversation that we need to have about a proper balance between the environment and economic development.
Great job. I think you're going to hear a lot about the importance of prioritization and balancing competing interests. And often what happens is that the debates, certainly at the local level, which is likely what's happening at the town office tonight, and also at the state level, can become very emotionally charged. And the important part of any debate is that it is focused on facts and information, and that there is objective analysis. And that is certainly true when it comes to the environment. We know how critical the environment is. We want to have a healthy quality of life here in Maine. We want to have clean water, clean air, and we want to have tourism. And so we know how important Maine's environment is to all of that. But we need to make sure that we are also balancing so that we're not so extreme in the policy decisions that we discourage businesses or prevent businesses from being able to develop their businesses or for roads to be built. You know, I toured a plant up in northern Maine. They make the paper bags for potatoes. And his requirements on air emissions are more restrictive than the regulations in the state of California. This is a family-owned business. They've been committed to Aroostook County, but that is adding significant costs to his product, and yet he's competing nationally with all these other companies. He's providing good-paying jobs. We want to make sure that businesses like that can stay in Maine and can succeed, because if we do all of these environmental laws, but people can't afford to stay in Maine, businesses can't afford to stay in Maine, then we will not have the kind of important balance with both a great environment and a robust economy.
Thank you. On to our next question. How do you plan on promoting Maine as a good place to live and work in order to keep and attract young people here and increase the productivity of our economy? This time we'll start with Representative Fredette, and we'll go to Commissioner Mayhew.
Thank you. Well, I mean, first and foremost, the first thing you need to do is actually have a robust economy. You can't be looking out to ask people to come to Maine unless there are good paying jobs. You know, New Hampshire's has the highest per capita income in the country. I believe it's around $75,000 per capita. In Maine, we're at about $43,000. So you gotta have good jobs. And that's, I think, going to be the key. But I think the other thing we need to do is we need to really truly start marketing Maine in a different way. You know, we spend a little bit of money on tourism marketing, but I think we need to look at it far more broadly. You know, I toured IDEX, which is a great employer here in southern Maine. It has lots of research jobs, high-tech jobs, really a fascinating place. Those are the sorts of businesses that we want to continue to attract here. Because not only are they great businesses and they attract people sometimes from out of state, but they bring spouses and with them and families with them. But at the same time, we need to be able to attract and keep our young children here in Maine. As I told you, my daughter just graduated. And so Maine's population's been pretty flat now for about the last decade and a half. You have to stop the out-migration of young people that are leaving Maine. Because they're the ones that are most likely to have children. And that's what's going to continue to add to our population base. We actually are at a point now where we have as many deaths as we do births in the state, more or less. And so that's the problem that we need to solve. But we need to be able to attract and keep those young people here by having good jobs at the end of the day. I think one of the other things that I would add on to that is student debt refinancing, so that if people go to college, they can look at refinancing that debt. And also maybe looking at financing of homes, first-time home buyers, so they have the opportunity to buy a home.
You know, it's interesting, when my 23-year-old son was looking to move to Portland and get a job, I remember having a conversation with him. He said, all right, Mom, if I'm earning this much, what can I afford for rent? And he's going through, and I was like, well, buddy, here's what you got to pay for groceries, here's what you got to pay for internet, here's what you got to pay for cable, and on and on and on, to come up with where is it affordable with the job that I have. And that's the financial equation that everyone, families, young individuals, older individuals, have to figure out. So this isn't complicated in terms of what is the success story for attracting individuals to Maine and keeping families and young individuals and our retirees here in Maine. It has to be a place where you get to keep more of your money and spend it as you choose, and to have good opportunities. You know, we don't have to look too far in New England to see a state that is going in the absolute wrong direction. Connecticut is in an absolute free fall, financial disaster. Employers are leaving, people are leaving. I'd also just mention, you know, for you that want to take a look at a great book, it's called How Money Walks. And it looks at several states where people have left those states because of the high taxes. They're New York, Connecticut, and Maine is in that top list. And the money was all going to Florida. And that's not just because of the weather, it's because no income tax. So we've got to look at what does it take, and we're pretty clear, we got to get rid of the income tax, and we've got to make this a place where people are excited to come. We know, when I say to people that I'm from Maine, their faces light up. People love this great state. So we've got to marry that brand of Maine with fantastic economic opportunity to have families thrive. Thank you.
So I think that one of the benefits that we have right now is that we have 2.7% unemployment in the state. That is really, really good. It's lower than the national average, and we are benefiting from the policies that have been implemented over the past 8 years. People aren't, while the left and Democrats are completely focused on the minimum wage and raising the minimum wage, Republicans are focused on the fact that we know that people aren't looking for minimum wage jobs anymore. They're looking for better jobs, higher paying salaries. So how do we do that? Well, I'll tell you first of all how we don't do it, and then I'll tell you how we do it. You know, we live in a global economy. Whether we like it or not, we have to compete with the world. We don't just compete with our other states. There's a company called Kestrel, and they built airplanes at the former Brunswick Naval Air Station. Well, they moved here from Minnesota. They got a good tax deal from us. And then Wisconsin came in and beat us, and they moved to Wisconsin. That doesn't help the United States of America. That only helps the one state that's getting the benefit. It hurts the other state that's losing those jobs. We have to go out into the world, and we have to compete against other countries for business to come bring them here. I'll give you an example of how we do it. Massachusetts did a program called the Mass Challenge. They found an opportunity in Israel. Well, not many companies can expand outside to their neighboring countries in Israel because the neighboring countries aren't big fans of Israel. So they opened up offices. The Commonwealth of Massachusetts opened up offices in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and Haifa, and said to the tech companies in Israel, come to Boston and we will help you set up shop for your expansion. They've created thousands of jobs because of that program alone. And as governor, that's something that I will champion. I will travel the world and find the best companies to come and grow here in Maine, because Mary and Ken are right. We have a brand to sell. People love Maine, and why not build a great business and raise a family here?
Thank you. Governor Paul LePage cut government expenditures. What would you do to continue on with this same conservative policy? Commissioner Mayhew will begin with you, and then Senator Mason and Representative Fredette.
Well, I was an integral part of that effort to cut expenditures in government. I oversaw the Department of Health and Human Services, which had a budget of $3.5 billion a year, over 3,400 employees. The Department of Health and Human Services is a third of the state budget. Frankly, when you combine the Department of Health and Human Services with the Department of Education, you are dealing with nearly 80% of all of the state funding. So that's where the focus has been, although you need to look across all of state government. But the bottom line is this, and it's true in your personal life, it's true in business. If you are reeling from one financial crisis to the next, you are not focusing on priorities, planning your core mission. When I walked into the Department of Health and Human Services, it had been bailed out every single year to the tune of over $100 million, constantly in crisis. And as a result, it was neglecting its core mission of taking care of our most vulnerable, our senior citizens, the frail 85-year-old grandmother, the 40-year-old with Down syndrome. So the point of the conservative approach to government is twofold. Take care of your core mission, make sure that the most vulnerable are getting their needs met, invest in infrastructure, our roads and bridges, take care of our natural resources, balance all those priorities, but at the end of the day, recognize that all of you will always spend your money better than government ever will, because you earned it, it's yours. And that has been the focus of our efforts in the last 7 years in the LePage administration. Keep government focused on its core mission, but allow hardworking Mainers and businesses to keep their money, to invest in Maine's economy. That's what's going to make a difference for our future.
So the budget document is the first thing that any governor will deal with, no matter if it's one of the three of us or anybody else in the race. It's the first thing that you will deal with when you walk into the Blaine House. You have to start working on it right away because the budget's due in January. So there's two sides of that coin, right? As there is in any budget, expenditures and revenues. One of the things that we've done is we've done zero-based budgeting. We've started the budget from zero and built out the things that we need from there. And that is how it should be done. In Augusta, for so many years, it has been, you start with X million dollars, you start there, and then you add up from there. We need to make sure that we start at zero and then go forward. But what we have done with the state budget, we have cut taxes so that we have more money to put in our rainy day fund. We have more money to give back to the taxpayer. We've had more money that we can put into essential programs and services, like Mary just mentioned, and like here at different schools that need funding. So what we have done in state government is we've formed priorities to make sure that the people that need them most are getting them. And we've done that through tax cuts. Conservative policies have worked. Maine has proved it. And so what I would do as governor is continue to do the exact things that we've been doing for the past 8 years, because we've seen that it undoubtedly has benefited Maine people.
Thank you. Well, much like what's going on down at the town office right now, when I came in the legislature in 2010 as a freshman legislator, I was appointed to serve on the Appropriations Committee. So much like what's going on down at the town hall, and they're writing a budget, I'm the only candidate of all the Republican candidates that's actually sat on the Appropriations Committee, being solely responsible for writing a budget, which today is $7.2 billion. And so when you have to look at and make those tough decisions and look at the priorities, I'm the only one that has sat on that committee. And then after that, for the next 6 years, I served as a leader, as the House Republican leader in the legislature, working at the leadership level to negotiate the budgets that have come out of Augusta now for the last 8 years. So what have we done? We've taken our state income tax rate from the top rate of 8.5% starting in 2010, and we are today down to 7.15%. Now Massachusetts is still at 5.15%, so we still have a long ways to go. We had no money in the rainy day fund in 2010, and today we have $200 million in the rainy day fund. We had a structural gap between expenses and revenues when we started in 2010 at $1.2 billion. Now it's $150 million. We worked through and we stopped Medicaid expansion so we could stop excessive spending, and our state unemployment rate has gone from 8.5% down to basically a historic low in the state of Maine. So we have done a lot, but I'll end with this thought. As much as the work that all three of us have done in terms of trying to move Maine forward, Maine still is the third highest tax burden state in the country. So let me just say that again. Maine is still the third highest tax burden state in the country. That's what we're working on. That's what we're trying to change. And even with all the work that we've done, we have a lot more work to do. And if we don't have a Republican governor to do that, I fear that we're going to be first in the country.
Thank you. As governor, what would you do to combat the opioid epidemic? Would you support tougher penalties on drug dealers or more treatment centers in Maine? We'll start with Senator Mason, then we'll go to Representative Fredette, and then Commissioner Mayhew.
Thank you, Jack. One of the biggest questions that we get, probably the biggest question we get when we're on the campaign trail, is what is government going to do to fix the opiate crisis? I'm concerned that that is the question that's being asked, because I don't think that government can solve the opiate crisis. I don't think that government is the end-all, be-all for the crisis. I think that we have a part to play, but I think that when you the biggest part is when you want to change yourself. If you're under that opiate addiction, you're the one that has to make the decision to change. It has to be an all-of-the-above approach. It can't just be one piece or another. Yes, we have to make sure that the traffickers and the drug dealers are penalized. We have to make sure that law enforcement has the ability to do that. We have to make sure that treatment is available for those that want it. And on the subject of treatment, we need to make sure that we're doing what works. I was just at a place in Machias, and it's called the ARISE program. It's a faith-based initiative, peer-to-peer. They have a 65% success rate, which is much better than the average. Sometimes good, effective treatment doesn't cost money. So I think that we need to do a better job of connecting state resources to maybe some faith-based resources and private resources. And that's something that I would do in the governor's office. What George W. Bush did, created an office of faith-based initiatives that connected some of those services with each other. We've seen that faith-based services work the best. They have the highest rate of people who don't recidivate. So that's something that I would do to combat the crisis. We have to do everything the best that we can. It's not just one thing or another.
I think it's our first disagreement tonight, Garrett, because I think the government, I think the government does have a role to play in this, and I think it has a significant role to play in this. You know, I served as a lieutenant colonel in the Maine Air National Guard. I've been serving for 20 years, and I continue to serve. And when you work in that role, you realize the importance of teamwork, of people coming together and servicing and focusing on a mission. And whether that mission is in the homeland or overseas, you realize you have a mission. One of the first things that I would do as governor is that I would declare a war on drugs. The drugs that are coming into this state and the gangs that are coming into this state from Boston and other places in New York and New Jersey is feeding an epidemic in this state. 418 people died last year, a record number of people. I think it was more than that, but that's the number they put to it, died from drug overdoses. We have more people dying nationally on a one-year basis than we lost in the entire Vietnam War. Think about that. So if government has a role to play, it has a significant role to play in this crisis. And I would engage in a concerted effort to stop drugs at the border, stop drugs at our coastline, so that we are stopping the drugs coming into the state. We then need to focus on treatment for those that are taking drugs. I visited the Hub and Spoke program that Maine Med has down at in Biddeford, and it's a program that's a holistic approach. I think it's a good program. We're going to support that in the budget so that we have a model to look at in terms of funding. And then we need to go into our schools and we need to talk about prevention. And so it's a three-legged stool approach, but in terms of a priority, my top priority would be declaring a war on drugs and stopping the drugs at the Kittery Bridge.
Well, I wish there was a silver bullet answer to this. We know that this is not a crisis that is unique to Maine. This is a national epidemic. Every state is struggling with this crisis, with just the horror over the overdose deaths that are taking too many, too young from us. But this is a complicated challenge because it does reflect both a concern over the overprescribing of pain medications. So 75% of those who are addicted to heroin started with a pain pill. I mean, if any of you, especially some of the younger ones in the audience, if you've had your wisdom teeth pulled recently, unfortunately, for years, there were too many kids leaving with a prescription for opiates. Just completely inappropriate. So we've made some progress on trying to get rid of some of the pain pills that have been out there, hundreds of millions of pills. But we've also got a problem with the breakdown in society of individuals who feel as though they have no self-worth, no self-confidence, no human dignity. They are far more vulnerable to substance abuse. I met with a group of women in opiate addiction treatment, and they said to me, we need to be able to work. Our jobs are what are keeping us alive, and that's what's helping us to believe in ourselves again. Government needs to make sure that when someone wants to get into treatment, that there is treatment available to them, if it's the publicly paid for treatment, and that it's effective. And right now, we can't point to a lot of effective treatment. And that's where government needs to create greater accountability for the treatment programs that are out there, that they're helping people get into treatment and for people to be able to stay in recovery.
Thank you. Our next question, do you favor expanding Medicaid or Maine care here in Maine? Why or why not? We'll start with Representative Fredette, and then Commissioner Mayhew, and then Senator Mason.
Well, one of the things that you need to understand, there's a couple foundational issues you need to understand about Medicaid expansion, and that is that we started in the 2000s, and then what happened in around 2010, we found that because we expanded, we owed the hospitals about $750 million on top of the debt that we had in the middle of a crisis of a national recession. That's what happened the last time we expanded Medicaid. So when I was on the Appropriations Committee in 2010, one of the things that we did is that we actually drafted language, along with the Democrats, to begin paring down the number of people on Medicaid from about 350,000 then to about 280,000 now. And that's what has allowed us to be able to make strategic investments in our state, to have $200 million in our rainy day fund, and to encourage people to get to work. Now, the other foundational reality that we have to look at is that the Maine people did vote in a referendum to expand Medicaid. And the governor has stated in his State of the State address to the entire legislature that he will implement that once the Democrats come forward with a bill that funds it in a sustainable way. Now, we just ended our legislative session. The House Republicans, of which I'm a leader, voted not to extend legislative session because the Democrats will not come to the table and vote on a bill that does not bring 3 or 4 or 5 other issues together to bring together with Medicaid expansion so that they can expand Medicaid without fully funding it. We made the right decision then. We are not going to look at the issue of expanding Medicaid again until it is fully funded in a way that we think is responsible for the state of Maine going forward. And I will fight that until we get a sustainable plan from the Democrats. And yes, I would implement it once we have a sustainable plan.
I led the charge to roll back Medicaid. I am adamantly opposed to expanding Medicaid. The pie is only so big. We just talked about the tax burden in this state. Expanding Medicaid has a $400 million price tag. We, unlike so many of the other states around the country that expanded, they didn't know what would happen because they'd never done it before. We've already gone down that path. We don't need to repeat the mistakes of the past. When Maine expanded, it sent the state into absolute financial crisis. Every single year, DHHS requiring a $100 million bailout of your tax dollars. But again, what was far worse is that we were adding, the state had been adding 25-year-old work-capable adults onto welfare, onto Medicaid, at the expense of a frail 85-year-old grandmother, at the expense of a 40-year-old with Down syndrome. Those individuals were put on wait lists and were not getting services in their homes. I am adamantly opposed to expanding Medicaid. What we need, right now there are thousands of jobs in this state, jobs with health insurance, and employers who cannot find employees who will show up on time, drug-free, and stay to the end of the day. The last thing we need to do is expand another government-funded program that discourages someone from getting a job because they don't want to lose their benefits. We have a huge problem in this state and in this country where millions of individuals have checked out of the workforce, and that's now happening even more because of Medicaid expansion. We've got to take care of our most vulnerable, and we need to make sure that our state resources are effectively prioritized. We have a $150 million shortfall in maintaining our roads and bridges today. We have problems still in our Medicaid program where we're not paying effective reimbursement rates for doctors, for hospitals, for home care. So no, we do not need to add 100,000 people onto the Medicaid program.
I mean, I think we're all in pretty strong agreement that we would not like to see Medicaid expanded. I voted against it back in 2011 when it was first brought up. I was very happy to be part and co-sponsor some of the bills that led to reducing that previous 2001 expansion, and I would do it again. The question that always comes up around that is, well, it was the people's will. People voted on that. Well, when you're governor, you have to kind of live by a little bit of an ethos to be effective. And that's what is popular is not always right. What is right is not always popular. Medicaid expansion is about priorities. And right now, what Maine people voted on at the ballot box was we want to prioritize people who are childless adults. And people sometimes have a hard time understanding what that is. What's a childless adult? It's me. Exactly. You beat me to the punch, Mary. Thank you. But that is who we're prioritizing over somebody with cognitive and mental disabilities, what we call Section 21 and 29 wait lists. We're saying that is more important than those people. And that on its face is ridiculous. So yes, I would fight to roll that back because it's the right thing to do. It's just that simple.
Thank you. If elected governor, would you support greater restrictions on firearms in Maine? And do you support the red flag gun bill? We'll start with Commissioner Mayhew, then Senator Mason, and Representative Fredette.
When I'm elected governor, no, I will not support more restrictions on firearms. We have a constitutional right to bear arms. I'm surprised that we continue to question the language of the Constitution. We need to protect our Second Amendment. I feel strongly about that. The red flag bill, I have serious concerns. I'm opposed to that. That is such a slippery slope. We have a well-established law today pertaining to individuals who have been committed to a psychiatric hospital and the requirement that that information be reported and that individual is prevented from getting access to a firearm. I have serious concerns about any subjective process that weakens that standard that exists today.
The short answers are no and no. I would not support any further restrictions, and I do not support the red flag bill. I voted against it when it came in front of the Legislative Council to be let in, and I would vote against it again. This is very simple. When we are elected legislators or governor, you swear an oath to the Constitution. The Constitution of the United States is very clear. The Second Amendment, we have the right to keep and bear arms. But you also swear an oath to the Maine state constitution when you're a Maine state elected official. And the Maine Constitution in Article 1, Section 16 is even more specific. And it says that you shall never even question the right to keep and bear arms. So as an elected official, I've sworn that oath. So is my responsibility to keep it. The red flag bill has a lot of problems in it. One of which is basically, I'll give you a brief overview of how it works. If you decide that somebody is a threat to you, whether it's credible or not, you can go to a judge and they can have those weapons taken away from you for 14 days, and then you, as the accused, have to prove that you are not a threat, and those guns, then you can get back after you've proven that to the court. That's not how justice works in this country. That's not how this works. So if somebody says, well, you have a mental disorder, well, if you look at the DSM-3, which is how psychologists diagnose mental disabilities, anorexia is a mental disability. Depression, seasonal clinical depression, is a mental disability. So are we going to start taking guns away from those kind of people? You start to go down a very sticky road when you start labeling people mentally competent and incompetent. So we have to be very wary of a bill like that.
Yeah, no, I don't support it. I, like Aaron, didn't vote to let it in. And I'm actually an attorney by trade up in rural Maine. And as an attorney, I was also what was called a complaint justice. And what that means is that I would get documentation from Spesquick Valley Hospital, which was the local hospital, and that paperwork would say someone was having let's say a mental health crisis and was maybe suicidal, and should we involuntarily commit that person to some sort of psychiatric help? And most times, I mean, obviously there was evidence to suggest that that would happen based upon a medical opinion, and that's what the whole blue paper process is about. What the red flag bill does, it carries that to the very next level and says, you know, if you can find that, then, you know, we want to then take their guns away from them. Or maybe even to a lesser level, not even find that. And so the bill was brought in late into the session. It's not something that you can work through very quickly. But look, I think we have to acknowledge Maine has a very strong, proud hunting tradition in this state. We have tens of thousands of people that come to this state to hunt. I've gotten A ratings from the NRA, A ratings from the Sportsman's Alliance of Maine. It's a solution that's in search of a problem. It's not an issue here in the state of Maine, and I think we really need to focus on issues that are of greater importance and priority.
Thank you. It's now time for our lightning round questions. Please answer the following with a yes or a no. If you have more to say on these subjects, please include it in your closing statement.
Would you be interested in increasing state funding for mental health initiatives throughout the schools in our state? Yes or no? Yes.
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 Can we revive the paper industry in Maine?
Say that again?
Can we revive the paper industry in Maine?
Yeah, it's already beginning. I mean, it's had a crash, but it's already beginning.
Yes.
Maybe.
Do you support sanctuary cities here in Maine?
No.
No. No.
Do you favor the use of ranked choice voting in Maine's June primary?
No.
No.
Do you support the tax on wage earners above $200,000 to fund education at 15%?
No.
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 I can't take this microphone.
Sorry, this is the last one.
It's okay.
Do you agree with the president in using social media to express your opinions as opposed to more traditional methods like press conferences?
Yeah, absolutely yes.
Yes.
Absolutely yes.
Thank you. We will now be moving on to closing arguments. Candidates, please keep these to 2 minutes. First up is Senator Mason.
This is closing statement. You know what? Okay, sorry. Well, thank you all very much for coming out and listening to us tonight. I very much appreciate that you guys showed up here to hear us out and hear what we have to say, because choosing the next governor is a really big deal. My family's been in this state for 200 years, and I love this state with every fiber of my being. I promise you that I will work every single day to make you proud and to make my family proud and make sure that we have a Maine that is worth living in decades from now. I would be honored to have your vote on June 12th, and thank you once again for coming tonight.
Well, thank you for coming out tonight. And look, you know, I've lived the American dream, and I'm very fortunate about that. I was born in Aroostook County. I was raised in Washington County, the poorest county in the state. And I was the very first in my family to graduate from college. I attended the local university, University of CEHS, where I got an accounting degree. Then I came down to Portland for 5 years, where I got a master's degree over at the Muskie School of Government in my law degree, and then had an opportunity after getting a fellowship of getting a master's degree from the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. I've served 20 years in the military, and I continue to serve. I have 2 children that have been raised in Maine and attended public schools. One that just graduated from college, and another's just starting his sophomore year in college. So I've lived the American dream. Because I really started out as our family was relatively poor, and I had to fight to get ahead, and that's what I did, and Maine offered me that opportunity. We need to continue to offer that opportunity for people throughout Maine, and particularly in rural Maine, which sometimes has different challenges than York and Cumberland County. We are blessed with the economy of York and Cumberland County as the engine for the state of Maine. But there are different challenges in rural Maine, different challenges for people like me who have to struggle to get to college and to figure out what it is that they want to do and what opportunities exist for them. But it's a great state, it's a great opportunity. We move Maine forward. There's one candidate that's not here tonight, who chose not to come here tonight, that says it's not about the policies. Well, this is about the policies, and we are moving Maine forward to continue continue to have those opportunities for people in Maine. So thank you. I ask for your vote on June 12th.
Thank you. You guys have done a great job. This has been a great forum. It's a wonderful opportunity to be able to talk about these important issues and the future of our great state. I am running for governor because we have an opportunity to build on the success of the last 7 years. We have a lot to be proud of in this great state. We love Maine, but we are also in a great position because of our hard work over the last 7 years to restore common sense, to bring fiscal discipline into the state of Maine. And we've done that because we do believe in the American dream. And we want families to be able to succeed. We want communities to thrive. We want schools to be able to focus on educating our kids so that they can be strong, independent, successful adults. Now, I grew up in Pittsfield, Maine. My parents worked hard. They believed in personal responsibility and the work ethic. They didn't expect government to provide a handout to them. They knew that their kids needed to be responsible, and that's what we've been doing, helping people break free of the welfare poverty trap in this state so that they can be independent and self-sufficient, and that they can then be strong, independent adults supporting stable families. Maine is on the right path to grow our economy and to have a strong, bright future. That's why I'm running for governor. I want to protect what we've done and aggressively move our state forward. And I would love your support on June 12th. Thank you so much.
Thank you.